Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video, and this one's going to be a little bit different. This is something that's just been on my mind and I've been thinking about for a long time, and I've finally found a way to articulate it in a meaningful manner. These are what I would consider to be the 5 motivations to play video games, and obviously with myself, having played World of Warcraft, there's going to be a lot of focus on World of Warcraft in particular, and what are these motivations, what are the positive aspects of it in terms of encouraging and cultivating a community and a player base to have the best experience possible. So to me, it's a series of treadmills, and we'll look at them here. They're not really in any particular order, but I will talk about their importance as we go through. And the first one, I think, that is the most obvious motivation to play video games is going to be the reward treadmill. So this is going to be the carrot on a stick. This, at the start of an expansion, is going to be the pursuit of maximum level. This is going to be the pursuit of the gear. This is going to be a pursuit of the power, right? The rewards, effectively, that are within the game. And this is at its highest, as I said, at the start of an expansion. However, it does diminish over time for 2 reasons. One of them is you've simply gotten the rewards, right? So once you've hit the level cap or you've hit your reward you were going after, what do you do after that? There's going to be suddenly this drop off of you're not really sure what to do. The other part of the downfall of this treadmill is going to be if you feel like you can never get to a goal, right? You may not have the skills or abilities to be able to defeat a challenging dungeon or the time required. So you may get into a bit of a pit where you feel like you're defeated. You're never going to get to it. Both of those are negative in their own right, or have some negativity tied to them. And that's what you see happen in most expansions, or even just most patches, is everybody right at the start, super ready to go on this treadmill, and they get going, and then they start either completing the reward, and then they start dropping off and they stop playing, or they feel like they can't ever get to it, and they give up. And these are 2 things that are very challenging to deal with, because one option is something like Azerite power systems, where you're always getting power-ups and you're always getting rewards, but then those end up making you feel bogged down, and you get a bit of a glass ceiling effect where you've realized you're just hitting this infinite ceiling, and there's not much real purpose to it. Or the other one, to fix the problem of feeling like you're stuck and you can't get towards your goals. It's a little bit tough when you don't have free time, obviously, to be able to correct this, but it's community, right? So it's people creating guides or helping teach people that can lift other people out of the pit that they're stuck in. And that's not really something that game design can inherently fix. Maybe there are systems that could encourage players to play with lesser experienced players to help kind of lift them up, show them the ropes, and get them going. And that's something that could fix the problem for that amount of players. But if it comes down to just overall time, it's going to be quite difficult to give you something that you don't have to be able to get to that improvement. This is an important treadmill. This is something that needs to exist. Otherwise, every competing game will have it, and you will not be able to compete with it. However, I don't think that it is the centerpiece or the main pin of motivation for video games, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But that is the reward treadmill. Moving on to the status treadmill. So I think a lot of you who have played World of Warcraft, for example, will know the feeling of getting a world first raid title, or getting a rank 1 PvP title, or a gladiator mount, or a set of tier gear from an older expansion, and sitting next to the Elwyn tree and having everybody kind of gawk at you in awe of your status and your achievements and what you've been able to accomplish. I do think that this is a very high motivating factor to video games that exists well in World of Warcraft, and if anything has been implemented better and better over time, with the addition of the top 100 raid titles, rank 1 PvP titles already existing, Mythic Plus mounts now coming in, and hopefully more rewards along those structures. These are very large motivating factors, even with things like the score coming to Torghast, right? So you'll be racing through and trying to get a high score. This is basically just the whole element of a high score and the pursuit of excellence towards the top of a leaderboard. This is something that I think that if games don't take advantage of, are missing out on quite a lot, because this is a huge motivating factor for a large amount of players to be able to pursue towards the top of something. And this could be even something as small as collectors, right? Getting all of the achievements in the game or getting all of the mounts. It doesn't necessarily have to be the highest capability of play in any given aspect. It could fall down into smaller categories like collectors and min-maxers and stuff like that. So it's sometimes tough to not tunnel vision into like thinking of only PvP and PvE and WoW, for example, as the top competitive levels of a status treadmill. There's a huge amount of other stuff, transmog competitions, there's an infinite number of subcategories of things that are status based. However, having ladders and leaderboards, so that players can feel their progression throughout a visible leaderboard rather than kind of just like this figurative one that we're all trying to create in our own minds, I think is an important motivating factor. I think it's one that World of Warcraft is implementing on more and more and more. However, it's again not the most important underpinning one, and this one, which is a little bit more complicated, it's more subjective. And I'm going to do my best to explain it. It's going to be the intrinsic treadmill. So this could be the value of learning how to do a 3-point basketball shot, or the intrinsic value of learning how to play a song on the piano, right? I'm sure that a lot of you have experienced the process of learning to do something, and then the satisfaction of after you've learned how to do it, and then the ability to repeat it. And then maybe once you've been able to repeat it, you're impressive. You're then going to then utilize it onto the reward treadmill. You're going to utilize it onto the status treadmill. And it's kind of just this spiraling upward effect. But the point where it comes into subjectivity is what is intrinsic to the game. Like for something like World of Warcraft, it could be your damage rotation, right? Effectively doing enough damage to get to the top of the DPS chart or to get a high raid parse. It could be your usage of crowd control to prevent important mechanics that allow you to get through a boss, right? That this is to me kind of the meat and the potatoes, right? This is the game. This is the fun of the game. Some people might think it's getting the money or getting the rewards or getting the titles. That's the fun, right? Well, that's going to be a chemical release, obviously. Otherwise, these wouldn't be massive motivating factors. However, I think at its deep-rooted center, this is kind of the intrinsic value of the content that you're doing. And I think that's why you start to see the things that have the most intrinsic value are the ones that populate with the largest audiences, right? So your dungeons, your raids, your PvP, your mount collecting, your transmogs, you start having kind of like the hierarchies within all of those different realms and categories, and those are really identifiable ones, right? Like you can think of them and know what I'm talking about, and that's where the intrinsic value of those come in. And I think that this is probably the most important. This is the underpinning, right? If it's just simply sit in your chair, you get gold for sitting in your chair. As you get gold, your status is going to go up on a leaderboard. People will participate in that, but to me, that's a very hollow reason to participate. And you come into all of the collection of pitfalls, like hitting the top of it or feeling like you'll never catch up. Those are the two kind of major negative pitfalls. Whereas this one gives you something clear and constructive to work on and improve towards within a game that you can see yourself making little improvements. It could be, again, simple as just playing some notes on the piano. You play them slowly, maybe you play them wrong, and then you start playing them faster, and you play them more correctly, and you can improve at it over time. This is the most important part of something. And I think that talking about WoW, again, when you're looking at WoW is WoW, that philosophy where everybody does everything, right? You raid, you do dungeons, you PvP, you do everything to progress your character. This is where it comes into conflict for a lot of players, because some people may only want to focus on the intrinsic treadmill of PvP. But if they are required to then do the intrinsic treadmill of raiding to get the rewards, to have the rewards to be able to focus on the intrinsic treadmill of PvP, their time is split. The time that they may not have, although it is great in theory, it forces players to broaden their horizons in terms of the major intrinsic values of the game. It's too much time. While WoW is WoW, I think that those separate avenues are entirely different games almost in their outright. While they share the same kind of skin and they share the same abilities, fundamentally the intrinsic value of them might have some similarities, but they also are at times quite different. And if you're spending a lot of time practicing one, that it'd be the difference between learning how to play the piano versus the guitar. They both play musical notes, but one is not going to help you learn how to play the other, but you wanted to focus on learning guitar. And they're all under the umbrella of music. But if you were to force somebody to learn guitar and piano when they only wanted to learn piano, you can see why that would become frustrating, right? For a lot of players. And I think at the moment, that's my biggest grievance so far. We can see some of the pitfalls of the reward structure falling through with how long the patch has been so far, right? Because everyone's hit their rewards. Everybody is, or maybe given up because they feel like it's too far away. But making everybody do all the content in the game is causing this kind of, what do you say, disruption, a little bit of an issue, at least for myself. And I think that's where kind of volatility or toxicity kind of comes from within the player base. That's where you get players who want to only do dungeons or are mad because they need to raid, or you get raiders who are mad because they have to PvP. They don't want to learn guitar. They want to learn piano. But if the game forces you onto the reward treadmill to do it, it's a problem. I think that it would be all right to have some, sprinkling around kind of incentivizations to try it. But when you're dedicated to repeat it over and over, week by week for something, to be able to focus on the intrinsic treadmill of your own part of the game, that's when it really starts to become problematic. But now moving beyond that, I think there are two more motivating factors. And this one is the social treadmill. This could be maybe a little bit of convoluted with the status treadmill, but just constant engagement with your peers, right? Negotiations, conversations, progressing together as a team through an activity, sharing your life experiences, building friendships and stuff like that. Obviously, this is a very important motivating factor. So having chat rooms, having discords, having stuff like that is going to be what really props up this social treadmill to get players connected to each other and to be invested with each other, and to then allow them to progress through the intrinsic treadmill towards the social and reward treadmills. And then you can see how these all work together, right? And when we're at the start of a new expansion, everyone's playing. There's tons of people to be connected with. That social treadmill is going at full capacity. The intrinsic treadmill of figuring out all the different class changes and all of the new dungeons going at max capacity. The reward treadmill of pursuing max level and all of the gear and everything that's involved with that is going at max capacity. The status treadmill of being the first one there and getting all of these insane mounts for your achievements or collecting all of them, whatever it is, right? You can see that this is why at the start of an expansion, it always is insanely popular, and then ends up falling off a little bit later. But these are why I think that these are huge motivating factors, and you really can't count out the social treadmill. And finally, one that I think we'd all like to not believe exists, but does exist, and maybe this one is controversial. This is going to be the grief treadmill. So this can be very simply dumbed down to a multitude of extremes, but one extreme would be world buff dispellers. In classic WoW, there are players who play simply for the fact of dispelling world buffs from people to impede their success in the other treadmills that I've explained. This is kind of the negative, the malevolent side of these motivational factors. But this could also come down to something even as small as getting satisfaction of Frost Novaing a warrior. I'm sure that we all know what that exchange feels like when you're the warrior and you're just angry, you can't do anything, you're in a Frost Nova, but the mage is, he's smiling. He's enjoying the Frost Nova on the warrior. So there are elements of this. And if that interaction wasn't there, there wouldn't be that kind of emotional connection or that emotional story that happens, right? There's a lot of cases where you might get attacked by a higher level player and you have to call in for help, and you're effectively getting part of the grief treadmill, but you can create a story how you overcame it, right? Is this something that maybe games should look to completely remove? I think would be an interesting debate. And I think that there are kind of obvious elements that shouldn't be allowed, right? It's like when we get into like personal harassment level stuff. But when it exists within the game mechanics itself, not so much the social aspects outside of it. I think that that's where the debate could be had. Should there be intricacies within the game that create moments of grief, right? So the Frost Nova on a warrior is an example, or the attacking of a low-level player and then having to band your friends together to be able to take them back, right? There's a huge story element to be had, and that's why I think that this listed as a motivating factor is important, because I think there are a lot of people that that is a main motivating factor, maybe even number one. And I mean, those might be the the evil doers of the world potentially, or maybe they're just living that through the fantasy of the game. Hopefully the latter and not the former. But I do think that this is an interesting one to think about in terms of motivating factors. But regardless, I hope that you enjoyed my talk here for my 5 motivations to play video games. I'd love to know what you think and what personally drives you into playing video games down below in the comments, or what gets you going with World of Warcraft in general. I just wanted to post this as a discussion point, because it's something that I'd been thinking about and just wanted to throw out there. If you liked it, leave it with a thumbs up, and if you like this type of content, then subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free, and it just lets you know when my videos go live. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.